I saw this article going around about how the ATA and some other, even my carrier's sent a Qualcomm message out and put a recorded message from our CEO asking us to use social media to tell the FMCSA about the hours of service rules. And I really encourage more drivers to get involved in social media. Facebook, just about every elected official's got a Facebook page. You can go on there and say stuff. You can email. There's no reason to not get involved in stuff anymore. Not with wireless communications and the information highway. But the one thing that bothers me about this is that last year at the Mid-America Truck Show in Louisville, and the FMCSA was there, and they had this listening session, and they had all these drivers that were coming in giving them their opinion about proposed changes for the hours of service. One thing that many of those drivers brought up was the split sleeper, the 5-5 rule, and it was totally ignored. We don't get paid for our time, we get paid to drive. Last night I sat at a shipper for 5 hours. I didn't get out of there until 11 o'clock at night. I don't get paid for that 5 hours. I'm, very far away from home. We live in the truck. So I see the ATA and the carriers are asking the drivers, on one hand they're saying, oh, we don't want you having cell phones in the truck. Well, cell phones make our lives a lot easier. You have to be self-sufficient when you're out here on the road. The carriers don't help you as much as they could. The truck drivers should be using social media. Yes, indeed, voice your opinions about the hours of service. But make it clear that you're not going to be the monkey for these carriers and the ATA who aren't really wanting to address the pay issues, but they want you to work harder. It's not practical to think that a driver can ever drive 11 hours every single day of the week. If I drove 11 hours every single day, I'm going to run out of hours and I'm going to have to do a restart. That's because I'm a solo driver. If I was a team driver, I wouldn't run out of hours, but I would have a different problem. It only takes 2 days to go coast to coast on a team truck when you've got another person in the sleeper who's helping you drive. When you're driving in a team truck, you don't have the same issues as a solo driver. You have this rule where you drive 11 and then you have to be in the sleeper 10, and the other person's not allowed to come out of the sleeper. That presents a problem because that means you're assuming they're getting a restful sleep in that 10 hours, and that's just simply impossible to do on a truck that is moving in traffic and in docking situations and being loaded that day. There's going to be situations every few days where one of the drivers is having difficulty getting proper rest because it only takes that long to get across the country and deliver whatever load you took coast to coast. That means they're going to be shifting, they're going to be stopping and starting, they're going to be making twists and turns, they're going to be docking and bumping the trailer against a wall, there's going to be people loading the trailer, and it's going to be rocking and shaking and jarring. And if you could imagine trying to get a restful night's sleep while someone is actually shaking your house, shaking your bed every 5 or 10 minutes, how much rest are you gonna get? They don't take these things into account. So you've got this driver that's in the sleeper for 10 hours, and all they've felt during their 10 hours is all of this movement, all of these disturbances. And now the driver on duty's forced to go in the sleeper, and the one that didn't even get any rest has got to drive for 10 hours. That's a ridiculous thing that was ignored time and time again by the FMCSA. It's just crazy that they do not see this. And at the same time, you have more of these student carriers running this team business model, where they're bringing these students in who have very little skill at all, running team freight with hazardous materials endorsements. It's a recipe for disaster. It's just simply ridiculous. It should be the 5-5 sleeper, because then at least whoever was on duty who's off duty, and this guy's in the sleeper and he's having or she's having trouble sleeping because of all this movement of the tractor, she can actually come out and say, look I did not get any rest, my shift is getting ready to start, I don't think I'm going to be able to drive the full 11 hours today. And the partner can say, you know what, I'm going to go in back and sleep for 5 hours, drive as close to 5 hours as you can, and then stop, and then I'll come out and do 5, and then you can go back and sleep, and we'll just do that till we get back on our schedules, okay? How does that sound? That's how you could work a team. That's how you could be effective. But the way they have it now, where they took that away, you're forcing this driver that's got no sleep, who's exhausted, they're going to have to get out on the highway and drive 11 hours. And the other person, it would be illegal for them to come out of the sleeper and help with the drive. It's a simple, it makes perfect common sense to anybody with common sense, but that was ignored time and time again when so many drivers brought up the topic. So now when they're saying, oh, drivers, come help us out of this situation that we're in with the HOS, they're going to reduce it an hour. Well, where were you when we needed you to speak up for us? That's how I feel about it. Let's start talking about some of this driver pay issues. Let's start using social media to start throwing it back in the trucking industry's lap. What are you want us you want to take the cell phones out of the trucks because, you're always trying to vilify the drivers instead of taking responsibility for the mess you've created out here, the chaos. They don't take into account that freight has to move in different ways. Dry freight, it's not time sensitive. But refrigerated freight is. It's got to be kept at the certain temperature. It's got to be moved. It's got to get to where it's going. They've got to keep it by the appointment. If it's frozen food or vegetables, the driver's responsible for that. Livestock. We have these animal rights groups that are concerned about the livestock being moved properly, and with good reason. I mean, nobody wants to turn on the TV and see a cow being electrocuted because its legs gave out on him and he can't get up to go drag himself into the slaughterhouse to be our hamburger. Nobody wants to see that on TV, Who's the pressure on? They're not allowed to accept an animal that is in bad shape. The driver of the livestock has got to maintain those animals and get them to where they're going intact. That's a lot of burden for the driver when you've got all of these federal rules and regulations that apply to one certain type of truck driver. You just can't have it all just the way that all wrapped up with a pretty little pink bow on it. I think that, drivers should use the social media, they make the YouTubes, and they should write the Department of Transportation, get on the Facebook pages and let these organizations know how you feel. But don't just go to bat for these carriers and the ATA and let them use you for their monkey. Tell them what's going on out here. Be polite. Just astounding to me how many brains they have working on such problems, and they come up with nothing. It's scary business, A lot of these drivers are highly intelligent problem solvers, but they don't have the ability to take the time off of work to come to Washington, D.C. and explain this to the people that make the rules. And if they have taken their time to come and stand before a listening session like they did in Louisville, the least they could do is acknowledge what they've said. But I don't see that. I see that they sat there, they listened, and they disregarded. And then they made up their own rule.